Good evening, everyone. This is Kelly McKenney Golden, presenting for EDL 851, module number 8, looking at legal aspects of teacher evaluation. So just a little bit about teacher evaluation in general. It's a formal process the school uses to review and rate a teacher's performance and effectiveness in the classroom. You're supposed to get feedback on your teaching practices and also guide your professional development. Traditionally, teacher evaluations are mostly based on classroom observations, but currently I would say over the past 10 years or so, more and more teacher evaluations are tying in student performance on high-stakes testing. So the Race to the Top Challenge changes everything. In 2009, the American Reinvestment Act provided $4.3 billion from the U.S. Department of Ed, offering grants to make certain changes to education. And one of those changes was to develop and implement new teacher evaluation models. And teachers would be evaluated on 3 levels of performance. Certainly, revamping teacher evaluation was a progressive idea. However, there were some issues with that. First of all, teacher evaluation is mostly a state and local priority. So there's going to be a lot of variability from state to state, from district to district even, from school to school maybe, even within a district. So for a federal policy to be implemented at the local and state level, you're going to see just a lot of variability across local and state governments. What we did start to see is in 2013, we had about 28 states requiring teachers to be evaluated annually. And then in 2013, also 41 states started to require the consideration of student data as part of the teacher evaluation. And a lot of times that student data was based on high stakes testing. Some states connected the new evaluations to tenure, promotion, and dismissal as well. So how do the new evaluation systems work? Well, traditionally, if you were looking at more of the traditional classroom observation model, you had a framework for teaching proposed by Charlotte Danielson, and that was periodic observations that were tied to teaching standards. That was kind of typically how teachers would be evaluated. Now, with tying in student data, you had a value-added model. And this is where state and districts used a predetermined weighting formula to compile results from components to arrive at a final score. But these varies depending on state and percentage of student achievement. So the value-added model, or VAMs, they're going to vary state to state depending on what percentage is deemed by that district to be performing or underperforming. So if you just take a look at the map above, you can see that teacher evaluation started to be tying to student performance in all of the states that are blue that you see here. So this was something that was certainly on the rise, and it's something that continues to be controversial. So just to kind of describe a little bit more about value-added models, I wanted to give you some examples. So I looked at a couple of districts, looked at the state of Louisiana, the state of Pennsylvania, and then also Florida. If you look at the Louisiana district, the COMPAS model, you see basically a 50-50 split. So the value-added measure established 2 student learning targets, which was 50% of the teacher's final score. And those value learning targets were assessed with a student performance-based test. And then the teacher was also required to have a minimum of 2 observations, which would make up the other 50%. So we're looking at 50% to be based on student achievement, and then 50% of the teacher's total evaluation to be based on 2 observations. So again, a lot of variability could happen there. If you look at the Pennsylvania example, again, you're looking at a 50-50 split, but I thought this one was especially interesting because you're looking at 50% coming from classroom observation, but then the other 50% that's student outcome data, you're actually looking at not just student outcome data from that own teacher-specific classroom, but you're also looking at building level results. So the individual teachers are not only scored against their own individual students that they teach, but upon the entire building as well. There's also a small elective portion that is contributing to that other 50%. And then the final graph that I wanted to share with you is teacher evaluation by numbers. And this one comes from Dade County in Florida. And it looks at the percentage of teachers and how they've rated over the past 3 years when that particular graphic was done, going from 2013 to 2016. And you're looking at the percentage of effective versus highly effective teachers. And again, the argument of using a value-added model is that it is going to increase teacher effectiveness in the classroom. If you look at the statistics given by Dade County, you really don't see a whole lot of variability. You see pretty much numbers staying the same for at least 3 years straight. So are the new evaluation systems working? Well, right now the results are inconclusive. Some teachers are receiving quality feedback and appear to be making improvement, but it appears that the new evaluation systems are still a work in progress. And so there's definitely still more data to be collected to see if the data being collected for the teacher evaluations is even really effective. So for Newport Public Schools evaluation system, where I currently teach, they give an overview in our contract of kind of how evaluations will be conducted. So the evaluations for teaching staff are completed by an administrative designee at whatever level you happen to teach in. So if you're an elementary school teacher, you're typically evaluated by an elementary principal, a middle school teacher, a middle school principal, high school teacher, and so on. If you are evaluated, if you're a specialist, so if you are an occupational therapist or a speech pathologist, or like myself, a licensed mental health counselor, your evaluations are supposed to be completed by the Director of Student Services. I will tell you that for myself this year, that is not the case. I am being evaluated by the high school principal. I work between the high school and middle school. And I actually personally reached out to the principal to evaluate me this year because at the start of the year, we did not have a Director of Student Services who is actually my immediate supervisor. And I just wanted to make sure that my evaluation did get done as it was my tenure year for this district. So I just wanted to make sure kind of all my ducks were in a row to make sure my evaluation was completed. And if the evaluation is unsatisfactory for any teachers, they're afforded the right to an appeals process within the district. And one of the things I found especially interesting when reviewing the Newport Public Schools evaluation system was the fact that how often it's reviewed. Now, it's actually reviewed yearly. So it's reviewed once a year by 3 members of the administrative staff that's selected by the superintendent, and also 3 tenured teachers selected by our union, our teachers union. So what happens is this team of people actually begins the beginning of September, and they have until March to review the evaluation tool that the district is using for that year. And they have to submit their findings to the superintendent to be discussed to make sure that the evaluation tool is still effective. And as part of this evaluation system, one of the quotes I took from our contract is, "No teacher shall be disciplined, reprimanded, reduced in rank or compensation, or deprived of any professional advantage without just cause." So a little bit more about the courts and legal concerns. I looked at 2 cases in particular. I looked at the Houston Federation of Teachers versus Houston. And this was an interesting case. It started back in May 2014 when a group of Houston teachers, 7 to be exact, initially brought a lawsuit saying that using value-added measures was not improving teaching and learning. It was actually ruining teaching careers. And it was kind of putting education down to just a simple test score. This legal issue went on for quite some time, and they actually ended up winning. And finally, the courts felt that the value-added scores could not be used to terminate a teacher as long as the teacher is unable to independently test or challenge the score. So this was a huge victory for teachers to be fairly evaluated, and that the value-added measures could not be used to make decisions about evaluations, bonuses, or termination. The other case that I found especially interesting was one teacher brought against the New York State Department of Ed, and that was Sherry G. Lederman, and she's a teacher from Long Island, and she brought a suit against her school district, not because she disagreed with her entire evaluation, but because she disagreed with one aspect of it. Her performance rating for her student performance had actually not improved. So the part of her evaluation that was actually based on student achievement testing had not improved, but she was overall deemed an effective teacher. So she had an issue with her evaluation because part of it was seen as not being effective, at least with regards to a student achievement. So a New York judge ruled that the use of student test scores to evaluate this Long Island teacher were undisputedly arbitrary and capricious. So again, that they just varied so much dependent on the student data that was being used that you couldn't really say that that was a good measure of Ms. Lederman being an effective teacher. Which really brings up a great point, this idea that it depends really on the testing that's being used. Some districts use, already kind of standardized tests. They might use PSAT and SAT data. Other districts use statewide tests. So in Massachusetts, the MCAS, or Rhode Island now the RICAS. But still other districts, as I was reading through the literature, are using something called STAR testing. And STAR testing actually isn't standardized at all. It's simply progress monitoring. So how effective the student actually is based on what percentage the district sets for those students. So it's really kind of arbitrary depending on what percentage the student is achieving, dependent on that particular district. And there's a lot of variability across the board. So what can I do as a future administrator? Well, there's a couple of things I can do. I think, first of all, I can listen to my staff and really actively try to collaborate with my teaching staff and with my faculty. I want to support them and really hear them, hear what they need to be more effective in the classroom, hear about what kind of resources they need to effectively develop their practice and really support their professional development. And I think just overall knowledge of the process is of the evaluation tool is really the most helpful. So depending wherever I end up in the district, I think knowledge of the evaluation tool that they're using will probably be the most effective. So I thank you all so much for letting me speak to you about legal aspects of evaluation, and I'm going to be wrapping it up for here. I apologize. I have a little toddler in the background crying, so I'm going to end it here now. Thank you so much.